All right, let's look at some objections to Singer's argument. So first, some have suggested that Singer's principle, which is the first premise in that principled argument, is actually false. If true, then the principle would be way too demanding. Because after donating your first $200, it would still be the case that you could still prevent something bad from happening without sacrificing something of comparable significance, and then be required or obligated morally to donate another $200 to save another life. And then you look at, well, I mean, there's another person, okay, another $200 and another, and so on and so on. And only once you are once you are also impoverished and on the brink of starvation yourself, would the principle no longer entail that you are obligated to keep donating. And then if donating endangered your life, it would now be a comparable sacrifice, and so you're not obligated to do so. So, is Singer's principle false? Making premise number 1 false. Another way of thinking about this, perhaps, is considering the fact that many of us can save someone's life by donating our blood or spare kidneys to them. This is an instance of preventing something very bad without sacrificing something of comparable importance. So, am I morally obligated to donate one of my kidneys? Intuitively, most would say that I'm not obligated to do this. It would be nice if I did, but I shouldn't feel obligated to do so. Or is there some way to argue that donating a kidney is comparable to a life? Maybe so. So in response, first, note this. If you reduce yourself to the brink of starvation, you will likely never graduate from college. You'll likely never get that great job you're looking for. You'll likely won't be able to generate a large income. So the best option would be to stay in school and get the highest paying job you can, and then spend your whole life donating as much as you can, right? So don't put yourself into poverty now and starvation now when you're not at the peak of your potential, right? Don't give your $200 now. Use that, invest in yourself, and then later, when you've made it, then give all of your time and resources to help other people, right? If that's right, then the principle does not entail that you should reduce yourself to starvation right this moment. Second, if this sounds too demanding, we might ask, why on earth should we think that morality should not be very demanding? Right? Perhaps it is very difficult, even bordering on impossible, to live perfectly, always doing the morally right thing your entire life, right? So just because it's morally hard or difficult doesn't mean that it's wrong or that we shouldn't do it. Or perhaps third, fine. If you're still unsatisfied, Singer says, well, fine, let's remove the word comparable from his principle and adopt instead this argument, which says something along the lines of, if we can prevent something bad from happening without sacrificing anything of moral importance, then we ought to do so. Now, while perhaps a kidney is of some moral importance, as are clothing and shelter, a college education, and so on, likely so-called luxury items are not really of any moral importance. And this would include things like that $7 Starbucks drink, or eating out at a restaurant, upgrading to the latest iPhone, going to the movies, and so on. In fact, a full 1/3 of Americans' income is spent on luxury items. So if luxury items fall under the category of not morally important, then even this weakened principle would still be quite demanding. Objection number 2. And the following objections are going to be looking specifically at the shallow pond analogy, trying to poke holes to say that the shallow pond analogy and the situation of starving children across the world are not similar. So if we think it is wrong to ignore the drowning child, but permissible to ignore starving children, then we will need to find morally relevant differences between these two cases. So let's look at some potential ones. So the first one is proximity. You are in close proximity to the children to the child in the shallow pond. But starving children are really, really far away. Now, how might this be rebutted? Does proximity matter? Imagine that you happen upon the video feed of a security camera that's showing you an image on the other side of the world. And on that video camera, or on that video screen, live streaming, you see a child drowning on the monitor. Imagine further that you can press a button that will save him. It seems like you would still be a moral monster for not pushing the button, right? So, does physical proximity really matter? I mean, is it morally relevant? I think Singer would say it doesn't really matter. Proximity doesn't. Okay, how about the uncertainty principle? Right? In the shallow pond, you are certain that your efforts save the child. But we are uncertain whether our donations will ever get to the people in need. Singer might respond by saying, this is simply false. You can do the research and find out which organizations are known for being successful and efficient. So there are a couple of websites like the charitynavigator.org or givewell.org. Both of these organizations rank charities and give them scores based off of their efficiency and their success at fulfilling their mission. Singer also suggests charities like Oxfam and UNICEF. But even if there was uncertainty, imagine that there's only a 50% chance that jumping in to save the drowning child will succeed. You'd still be a moral monster if you decided not to jump in and at least try to save the child, right? And so even though you're not certain whether you'll get there in time, you should still try, right? And so Singer would say, even though you may not be confident that all of your money will get to where it needs to go, it still would be morally wrong not to give any. So uncertainty, Singer would argue, is not morally relevant. Next, it's the others can give argument. Oh, this is one of my favorites. There's a lot of other people in the world. They can do all of the heavy lifting, and I'll just sit this one out. So in the shallow pond, you are the only one there that can save the child. But there are lots of other people in the world besides you or besides me that can help the starving children of the world. Singer would respond by saying, the fact that other people are doing bad things does not make it okay for us to do bad things. Sounds like my mom. Imagine that as you pass the pond, there are 100 other people picnicking and hanging out around the pond. You see the child drowning, but no one is doing anything about it. No one jumps in to save him. Would this fact make it okay for you to also do nothing? No, that's absurd. It seems that those people are all moral monsters, and that you would be just as bad as them for not jumping in to save the child. So the starvation problem, so that the presence of others is not morally relevant, says Singer. So fifth, the final objection that I'll raise is the size of the problem. In shallow pond, if you save the child, the whole problem will be solved. There are no more children starving. There are no more children drowning. But if I save one child today, one starving child today, there would still be 12,999 other children who will die of starvation today. So the starvation problem is just too enormous that I cannot make a dent in this problem. Therefore, I just won't do anything about it. So Singer would reply by saying, the fact that no single person can solve the entire problem of famine is morally irrelevant. We are still morally obligated to do whatever we can. For instance, imagine that as you pass by the shallow pond, there were 1,000 drowning children. Ah, the humanity! You then think to yourself, if I jump in and save one, there will still be 999 other children drowning. Maybe I'll have enough time to save 2 or even 3 children, but the rest of the children will surely die. Would this make it morally permissible to ignore their entire situation, or to continue on your way without doing anything? I think Singer would say, probably not. Our ethical intuition here is most likely such that we are morally obligated to jump into the pond and save as many children as we can, even though we know that there is no way for us, a single person, to save all of them. So there we have it. This is Peter Singer's argument, the shallow pond. And these are some common objections raised. It's up to you to decide, though, for yourself, what is the morally correct response. Something that we haven't been doing much of recently, though, is considering the arguments made by utilitarians or by Kantians. So maybe it would be of value to take a moment and ask, what would John Stuart Mills do? What is the utilitarian answer to this question? Or what is the Kantian response to this issue? Certainly some things to think about. In our next lecture, we're going to be taking the argument on the other side. Look forward to watching children dying. Just kidding. No children are dying in the filming of this lecture.